Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 11 of EdUp International, part of the EdUp Experience family, where we make education your business. I'm your host, James Shafer. I'm with Ruhl University in Times Square, New York City. I kind of took a bit of a break. I had a work trip to India, was sick for a little time coming back, but here I am, we're back. We're going to get some episodes going again. This is episode 11. I'm going to start out with a quick excerpt from SEVIS Ed Insights with Jesse, then get right into episode 11 with Sara Schmitt of Adro. That's joinadro.com, ADRO. Stick around to the end of the episode. After the episode with Sara Schmitt, we'll have the full session with SEVIS Ed Insights with Jesse. Thanks, as always, to Jesse and SEVIS Education for sponsoring the podcast. You can reach out to him at jesse@seviseducation.com. Visit them on their website at seviseducation.com. So let's start here. Quick excerpt with Jesse, and then right into episode 11 of EdUp International with Sara Schmitt.
Special student relief is what we call the process that the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security will take when it identifies certain areas of the world and publishes those areas in the Federal Register and indicates that F1 students who are in the United States and are in status at the time, whether they are citizens from these particular countries or residing in the particular area of the world that's designated in the Federal Register, those students are eligible to request from the DSO certain benefits resulting from the loosening of the regulatory requirements.
All right, thank you, Jesse. My guest today is Sara Schmitt. She is the COO and co-founder of Adro. That's joinadro.com, joinadro.com. So this is all about banking, finance, all these solutions for international students and international workers. So Sara Schmitt has a bachelor's degree in poetry and political science. She has an MBA from Cornell Johnson. She is now a graduate level educator at 2 universities in New York City, teaching project management and systems analysis and design. She co-created the online certification class in entrepreneurship for eCornell. And I find most interestingly that she has some awesome hobbies: bodybuilding, a collector who swaps heirloom puzzles, and bird watching. So, Sara, could you tell us a little story about bird watching?
Absolutely. So of all the colorful things I've done, this one kind of fits squarely in the meme category. Of course, during COVID, like many people cooped up in the house, I kind of got into watching all of the outside critters from indoors, and got really into watching birds, and that sort of carried through. So in my current apartment, I had set up a collection of bird feeders and started feeding them, and noticed that the birds were kind of slow to come to the balcony to eat. So I kept adding bird feeders until one day, then they discovered it, and they discovered it very quickly and ravenously. So it led to a couple complaints in the apartment complex. And so I've been exploring the world of clean seed now, but have gotten quite into identifying birds and also starting to build up a collection of images that I can look at when even when I don't have the feeders full. So
yeah. Yeah, well, interesting. I always had a cat growing up that tried to get right into the bird feeder to scare away the birds. But my grandmother was big into bird watching also, so I enjoyed that a bit growing up. So yeah, it's an awesome hobby. Yeah. All right, so we're here to talk about banking, finance, and what goes on with international students and international workers. Because I have worked myself at an ESL school, at a couple of universities, and that's always one of the big issues, is students having extra difficulties beyond what the domestic students have with banking and finance. I don't know if maybe you can start off talking about some of the barriers there are that international students face with banking and finance in the US.
Yeah, this is something that my co-founding team and I we explored a lot very early on when we were deciding if this was a space that really, where do we invest, where do we build, is this still needed? And it's really disappointing to learn that, even in the time that since we've been in undergraduate programs, that not much has really changed. That many students come over and they're treated by banks as subprime or not good candidates or customers for normal banking products. So we're seeing that our peer students who are highly qualified, brilliant, coming over with enough money to fund rather expensive graduate programs, can't get a checking account at a bank on the first try, certainly can't get a credit card or the caliber of credit card that a US citizen can easily access. And one of the main barriers for that is the lack of social security number. So a lot of our financial systems in the US are simply based on, do you have this number? And if you don't, they don't really have a pathway for getting you into their systems, and they're not really willing to take a risk and say, well, we'll use your passport instead. We'll use other information, and we'll trust that you are the type of customer that we want. So we're trying to change that, and build out a different system for vetting folks and get them banked, because we believe that international students are among some of the most hardworking and brilliant minds that are coming here and have a lot of value to add.
Yeah, and when you think about it, basically the US government has done the work for the banks as far as vetting the international students that have strong financial sponsors, because they've denied the visa of those who didn't have strong financial sponsors. That was always the logic I started using when I first started talking to banks about, why are you not giving bank accounts to the international students?
100%. That I-20
they've got a
process
strong
is
financial sponsor or they don't get the visa. Yeah.
Exactly. That I-20 process is so rigorous. It's more rigorous than what a US citizen would go through with a social security check and a simple background check.
Right. So in the social security number is interesting because the international students can only legally get a social security number either when they get that job on campus or they get that legal internship with curricular practical training, which usually only starts in year 2. So if you're not lucky to get the on-campus job, you can't get a social security number in your first year.
That's right.
Yeah,
that makes it tricky for credit reporting too. So there's a lot of companies out there that won't start credit reporting until you get that social security number on file. So that can mean that's 2 years of spending and 2 years of data that's not calculated towards your score. It's 2 years of history that doesn't count. So I know this is something that we're doing at Adro, is doing retroactive credit reporting back to that first card swipe. And I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that the market is also going to see that, and we're going to see more financial services doing that. We have the data, we have the ability to do that. It's just it's companies taking that step to report that to the credit bureaus proactively, and be able to tie up that data once a social security number is obtained and applied.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So can you tell us how an international student can start building credit history before they get the social security number?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing to do is to get a credit card of some type, even if it's a relatively basic card with a low limit, and to use that for some daily purchases and to pay that off. So to start establishing those good behaviors around saving, spending, and being responsible with credit. And that history should be recorded, and provided that they're using a product like ours or another one that can do that retroactive credit reporting, then that will count as soon as they're able to get their SSN on file. So it's just about trying to work that into your daily life and figure out how you can use that for a reasonable number of expenses to show that you can use that responsibly and you do have that on-time payment history.
Okay, yeah, actually I learned something. So as someone working in the international team at a university, let's encourage students to get that first credit card right after they land at the airport here. So they start building that. What are some other good habits financially that international students can do right after they arrive in the US or even just before they come to the US?
That's a great one. I think there's so many. Really pay attention to any financial literacy education that's being offered through the school, and ask other students and ask teachers. I think a lot of the professors and folks within the support departments and ISS teams can speak from their own experience and share, hey, this is what I use a savings account for. This is where I put aside money, and this is what's useful. This is what I use a checking account for. This is what's normal. This is what I pay for these services. Increasingly, I'm seeing a lot of students students coming over thinking that it's normal to pay a subscription fee or a fee to access basic banking, which is not typical and should not be the case in the norm. So that's something to help correct and watch out for. Knowing how to use credit and what it is and what it does for you. I think because it's not something that's used in a lot of countries around the world, but it is used really heavily here. That's a point of education and an important one because we pull credit score for a lot of different things in the US, especially in the New York area. And if you want to get an apartment, a credit check is one of the first things that a landlord will be doing and looking at to decide if you're credit worthy, if you can have this apartment. So if you don't have that history, it can be really tough to find a place after you graduate and are getting a job. The other area of focus I'd want students to take a look at is understanding kind of how their bank and how their different financial institutions and the school communicate with them. Look at the mechanisms they're using. Is it paper? Is it email? Is it all through a website? There's a lot of increasingly sophisticated scams out there, and that's an area that students really have to be vigilant around because there's some bad actors, unfortunately, trying to tap into their systems.
All right, we're going to get to scams a little bit later, but I want to keep on the credit history and getting that bank account set up early, the credit card set up early. So you can even help students to set up that bank account before they fly to the USA, so that they can have a bank account set up as they arrive. I mean, if they set it up and the visa is denied, is there any sort of punishment that they've set up a bank account and now they can't come to the USA?
Not at all. It's a terrible situation, but we know it happens often. So yes, it's one of the things we do is help students get banked early, which can be especially helpful if they do need to put some of their loan money into that account, or they need to show proof of funds, and they need an account in USD to demonstrate that. But at some point, if the student doesn't matriculate, if the visa doesn't come through, if there are other issues with travel or transit over, the student can, of course, close the account, move the money out into their other accounts, or keep it if they're going to try again for the next semester. So they have options there. And of course, we're not going to hold the money. We're not going to penalize that. It's just it's a terrible outcome, and we don't want to make that worse. We want to see those numbers go up, and we want to see more visa approvals. But we'll do what we can to be part of that process, but understand that sometimes it doesn't always happen.
All right. Okay. And then scams came up. So could you talk a little bit about scams? There's always new ones coming up, but you said there's some old school scams that are coming back.
Yeah, this is an interesting kind of point in time right now. So we're seeing the rise of AI, and we're seeing a lot more sophistication in many of the scams and the communication around them, whether it's text messages, WhatsApp messages, emails. They're getting a little bit more professionally crafted. They're a bit more grammatically correct. They're a little harder to spot. I'm seeing a lot more call outs at the schools I teach at too, of even professors and faculty and staff falling prey to some of these scams because they're very good. They're engineering and looking for a lot of information about the school and the departments and working that into the messaging. So I think that's one area where if there's anything that smells off or just seems unexpected, get a second opinion. One hallmark of scams will always be a sense of urgency and a push to do something very quickly. And if you know the government and you know schools, they don't move that fast. They're usually going to ask you for something, but there's never going to be this immediacy of minutes or hours. Whereas with a scam, there always will be. So get a gut check if you're not sure about something. The worst case is that it is real and someone can confirm that, and that's great. And then it's also a great case if someone says that's not real, and I'm glad you didn't click on that or do that or send money. But with all of the sophistication we're seeing, we're also seeing a return to some of these older style scams that many students might not be familiar with. Students born in this century who have never used or seen checks, physical checks. We're seeing a lot of check cashing scams now again. So folks might come to you as a student and say, I've got a $5,000 check, but I don't have a bank account. Can you cash this for me in your account? And you know what? Just to thank you, I'll let you keep $1,000 and you just send me $4,000 on Zelle or Venmo or cash or whatever mechanism that they have. And so the student's excited, they cash this check, it seems to go through, they send money, then the check bounces. They realize this check isn't good. The person canceled or put a stop payment on that, or there never was the funds to pay that check in the first place. But with some of that digital check cashing, it can look as if that check did cash the first time. So now the student's out $4,000 when they thought they were going to have $1,000. So those are really scary. If someone someone else is saying, can you help me with this large sum of cash, that should be a red flag as well.
Nobody's going to give you $1,000
just to help you cash a check. There's other ways around that. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But as a student and as someone trying to navigate this very bewildering space, I can see how that would be very tempting. That would be very attractive.
Yeah, and speaking of that again, I mean, anytime somebody is on the phone wanting social security number, credit card number, any other financial, just say, all right, give me your name, give me your phone number, give me your email address, and give me your website. Write it all down and go to your international office and talk with them, because the US government will never ask for money.
No.
Schools are pretty slow, like you say. They're not going to be insisting that you give money right away or you're kicked out of school. It just doesn't happen. So
there's always
we want you to stay in school.
Yeah, if you think about the government and schools, there's always a way to pay late. There will be fees, but there's usually a way. There's never like a hard stop where at this point it's not possible. It's usually, it'll be possible. It's just got more expensive.
Yeah.
So
And nowadays it's possible that they spoke to your mother by phone and recorded her voice and then used AI to pretend that it's your mother who's on the phone. So even that, you have to just slow down.
Yep. Message someone through a channel that you know it's them. Go call them, go text them. What's really interesting too, from a business standpoint, we recently filed trademarks for all of our business marks in our logo. And immediately upon filing that, because that becomes public information, you start getting scams weekly. So we get mail every week from very sophisticated and very realistic looking legal agencies saying that they need more money, that they need something to expedite that application. When in reality, the government process is you submit and you wait 7 months and hear nothing. And then all of a sudden you find out if you're trademarked or not. So those are especially, I think, anything related to visas too. The process is similar. You submit something and you have this painful waiting time. So it can be tempting or exciting to get some kind of an update or hear something and think it's real because you've gone so long without getting an update. But that, unfortunately, the government is, that's the way it works, is often there's these long waiting periods and there really isn't anything to do, submit, or pay in the intervening period.
Yeah. Although on the other side, I mean, the government reserves the right to look at your social media channels when it comes to asking for a visa and entering the US with that visa. So know that what you post on your social media channels, the government can have a look at it and potentially could deny you entry to the US based on what's being posted there.
That's a great point. Yeah, you should always be professional. I mean, your interactions, especially online. That's good advice, I think, for students. And think about what you're sharing and the face you want to portray. Your future employers will be looking at it too. It's not just limited to the government.
Yeah. So what can be some other bad habits financially for international students, especially when they're just arriving to the US and getting going?
Yeah, I think one thing that some students do, especially if they're planning to get banked when they come here as opposed to in advance, can be bringing a large amount of cash over. That's risky. Traveling with that obviously is a scary proposition. So really try to limit what you bring over to what you're going to need during the first few days, and then do a money transfer to get the rest of the funds into an account. If you can set up an account ahead of time, again, that's something we offer to help facilitate that, so you don't have to spend time waiting in line and spending up to half a day really finding a bank that will get you connected with a checking account and then get your money set up. That will make that process a lot easier, just to do it in advance. But otherwise, get it done right away. Move quickly to get an account open and get your money secured in there. American banks are FDIC insured up to $250,000. So depending if you have that amount or less in your bank account, that is protected. So you don't really want to keep money in cash if you can keep it in an account and secured.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, I think it was about a dozen years ago where we had actually someone from the local police precinct come in, and he said, Asian males are targeted because the criminals know that they like to carry lots of cash.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
So the word gets around. So you don't want to be having large amounts of cash when it can easily be in a checking or savings account that's earning you interest.
Right. And especially in a lot of places now, a lot of payments are digital, they're mobile. You can use a card for most things. And if you need to take out money from an ATM, kind of plan that. Usually I take out money from an ATM once or twice a month, kind of know what my expenditures are going to be in cash, and then try to minimize that, because if I'm traveling around, especially, there may be some fees associated with it, and not all banks reimburse those fees. So get in the habit of planning and understanding what your spend looks like, and then just taking out the cash you need for a given week or 2 week period, carrying around a small amount to cover those basic and emergency expenses, and then using a card for what you can, because that's going to be more secure. And if there's an issue, if there's fraud, you can put a stop payment on, you can cancel. And if you're using a credit card, you can also earn rewards too, which, as a student, that might not add up to much, but putting all of your books for a semester on a card and getting 1% back, that's significant. That gets you a few extra supplies. That gets you a meal. That gets you something, to study break treat. So that's useful. And it also is, again, protected, and you have some insurance in case there's an issue with the order or the product, and you want to kind of dispute that with a vendor.
Right. And you're building your credit history when you use the credit card and pay it off on time. So that's a good thing to do. Actually, since I brought up a specific region of the world, you said that there were some scams targeting a specific country. Can you talk about that?
I think we're going to see more and more of that too, as we see different, obviously, world events and economic events impacting parts of the world, and people asking for donations or help in certain regions. So all students should be vigilant for this, but there's been a number of scams that have been fairly sophisticated targeting Chinese students recently. So scams where the voices of family and friends will be mimicked using AI, and it will kind of look like a scheme where the family member is in trouble, and they need immediate help, and they need immediate cash, and the student is being asked to pay or send money through some whatever channel the scammer is looking for, usually some kind of mobile payment system, sometimes gift cards, and watch out for that. If that's the case, keep the person on the line, maybe walk to the international student office or to a friend's place, try to be texting or messaging with a family member or friend at the same time to confirm, hey, are you in trouble? Is something going on? Get some validation. If you can keep the person on the line and engaged, that will give you time to validate whether it's real or not. And in many cases, it's not real. And we want to slow down the process as much as possible, decrease that urgency to give you the ability to kind of think it through and confirm what's really going on. Another watch area related to that would be anytime anyone's asking you to send them gift cards, codes, one-time passwords, all of that information, that's typically not something you should ever share. Most companies actually in the US have pretty strict requirements in their terms and conditions that you should not, as a user, share your password and your information. That's yours. That's your private info. And that's the same with many of the one-time passwords that you get to log into an app or to authenticate that you're the user. So if someone's asking you for that, that's also a red flag in many cases. If someone's asking you to buy gift cards and then give them the codes on those, that's not a way you're ever going to pay for something legitimate in the United States, especially with the government or schools. No one's ever going to ask you to pay your tuition in Amazon gift cards. No one's ever going to ask you to pay for a visa or expedited processing or any services using some combination of gift cards that you'd buy in a department or a grocery store. That's not a thing. And they'll have all kinds of excuses or reasons why you should do that. But it's always going to be a check or a money order or some online payment. And like schools, it's going to be paying through the specific channels that they have told you on their website, and never anything else.
Correct. Yeah. So that's some good things for international offices to think about for their orientations.
Yeah.
Especially in the first case, if they have a lot of Chinese students, to really bring that up specifically. And then speaking of international offices, we were talking before we started recording about how there was a tax company that found a neat solution for small international offices with no budget, because of the problem of so many international students that are not filing their taxes. But there's sort of a disincentive for the international office to always be saying, file your taxes, because then the next thing you know, you've got 40 students asking you to be their tax advisor. But then this company found a solution where you can just refer the students for a very low fee, and they help them with their international taxes there. So do you have something similar with Adro?
Yeah. So one of the things that we offer through the Adro platform is we're working with a lot of different partner companies who support international students and workers in specific areas where we may not directly provide that service. So a good example of that would be housing and guarantors. And loans for school, loans for housing, loans for autos. So those are all things that we have referral partners who know and work with an international population, who can provide those services without a social security number, who have a lot of experience working with students from India and China, and from Africa and from around the world, or from workers coming here with kind of unique situations and timing needs. So we absolutely can, through our marketplace, refer out to some great partners who help with taxes. Taxes are a fun responsibility. We all get to pay those, but if you are looking to stay here long term or work here in the US, it's important to get those tax filings in. You may not owe anything. The cost is relatively low, but working with one of those partners can be really valuable, so that you know that it's done right, that is taken care of on time, and that you have the digital paperwork then that you can save and use for H-1B applications in the future, or if you're ever, if you need that for an employment situation.
Right, because for international students, even if they are not working in the US, they have to file a one-page tax form that takes about 30 minutes probably.
Quick.
But if it's not filed, they can get in trouble down the line when they apply for other benefits. And I believe they have 3 years to file it retroactively.
That's right.
So if you're listening to this, international students, and you haven't filed for the past 3 years, you can still do it. So.
Yes, don't just hide, don't just put it off. You'll hear some celebrities who try to run away from it. The IRS will find you. So just get it done. Taxes are due on April 15th every year unless you get an extension. Just get it done. Just do it, and get some help doing it. Use a service. You don't need to get the fanciest accountant, although if your tax situation is more complex, that can be very useful. And we're working to kind of build a network of some tax services and accountants who may work for some of those situations. But ask around, again, ask international student offices, ask some of your professors, ask your peers for recommendations here. But there are good services that we can also recommend through our platform.
Good. All right. So any really good messages to get out to the international offices at higher ed institutions and also at the language providers and other types of institutions that have international students?
Absolutely. I'm excited for the 24-25 school year. I know I'm looking forward to all the new students coming in. And I mean, it's a growing international population, increasingly diverse. And I always love teaching a diverse class and just hearing the perspectives and the creativity from these students. So let's think about ways we can help and support them, help them get set up as early as possible. Increasingly, one of the trends I'm seeing and trying to support is more pre-arrival orientation. What can these students start doing now? They may be finished with secondary school and have a few weeks in their summer, and get them some of the learning and education, help get them rooted in some of the American cultural differences, and get them set up with banking, make sure their finances are squared away, make sure they're checking things off their list before they come here, so that orientation can really be about getting to know the school, the program, their peers, the fun stuff, as opposed to trying to run around and get services set up that in some cases they could have done earlier. So Adro's happy to help. If you don't have a lot of financial literacy education materials, if you want to get students banked early, if you have students who have complex financial needs coming from abroad, we'd be happy to talk. We're happy to provide free resources and materials. We are no cost to universities and no cost to students. We are here to help and connect students with better financial services and make sure that they have equal access and opportunity when they get here.
Okay, Sarah, so how can people connect with you and how can they connect with Adro?
Great question. Find us online at joinadro.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn. We're very active there. And you can also email me at sarah@joinadro.com. Always happy to talk. Always happy to get on a call and figure out how we can work together and make things better for international students.
Okay, and if I want to go bird watching, where's the next place I should go bird watching? Because I actually do enjoy it. I've been to Costa Rica and some places with some great birds.
You've got some good stuff.
Where should I go bird watching?
I haven't done a big year yet, but I think what's really interesting is some of the migratory patterns and like the climate change is making more birds kind of come to colder climates. So we're starting to see interesting and exotic birds even in New York and New Jersey. So I'd venture out to some of the kind of parks in this region and see what kind of interesting animals you could find there. Check eBird and Merlin scan for some of the recent sightings to see if there's something to spot even in our backyards, because often there is.
All right. Okay. All right. Thanks. So this is a wrap for EdUp International. Stay on because now you're going to get the rest of SEVIS Education Insights with Jesse. Sara, thanks for joining us today on EdUp International. This is episode 11. If you are a thought leader in international education, please reach out to me. You can connect with me by LinkedIn, James Shafer on LinkedIn. I'm working at Ruhl University. Let's get you on the podcast. So Sara, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jim, for another opportunity to speak to your listeners. Today, I'd like to talk about special student relief and very, very briefly, temporary protective status, because the two of them very frequently overlap. And so special student relief is what we call the process that the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security will take when it identifies certain areas of the world and publishes those areas in the Federal Register and indicates that F1 students who are in the United States and are in status at the time, whether they are citizens from these particular countries or residing in the particular area of the world that's designated in the Federal Register, those students are eligible to request from the DSO certain benefits resulting from the loosening of the regulatory requirements. And the regulatory requirements essentially are for the full course of study. So if you have a student who is eligible, they can request that the DSO allow them to enroll in a reduced course load. But there are also expanded employment opportunities for students who are eligible for special student relief. It's key, though, to recognize that merely the designation of these countries or these areas of the world do not automatically entitle your students from those areas. So by the way, the 12 countries that are currently on the list are Afghanistan, Myanmar, and Burma, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Haiti, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, and Yemen. We also have the city of Hong Kong designated and Palestinian territories designated. So your students who are residents of Hong Kong or who are Palestinian are eligible to come to their DSO and request special student relief. However, the students must still show you that they are encountering the economic difficulty. The language in the notice specifically states that the students must be currently experiencing severe economic hardship. And the severe economic hardship that they are experiencing, or the definition of that, is the exact same definition that we use when we as DSOs are determining whether or not a student is eligible for relief pursuant to the severe economic hardship work authorization. So your students, even though they're identified, or their country might be identified by the Secretary as one of the countries that entitle the students to regulatory relaxation, nevertheless, the students themselves must show that they are experiencing that severe economic hardship difficulty. That's different from the list of countries or areas of the world where the Secretary can designate individuals of all categories eligible to apply for temporary protective status. So severe student relief, it's through the DSO, and it relates only to your F1 students and not M1 students, by the way. Whereas temporary protective status, or TPS, applies to all non-immigrants at all categories from those particular countries. As it relates to our F1 students who are also eligible for TPS application as well as SR, they are not required, or it's not a requirement of TPS application to show that they are suffering severe economic hardship. So it's a very, very important consideration. The question frequently arises, can my students apply for both? And the answer is yes. They may apply for severe economic hardship, and they may also apply for temporary protective status. Going down the road, does it get complicated, and do immigration lawyers differ on how they interpret what an international student should do, or in what status the student should remain in? Yes, indeed, it can be complicated, but the general answer for students who are asking, can they apply for both, special student relief and temporary protective status? The answer is yes, they can. So it's a very, very brief summary of temporary protective status. If any of your listeners have any other questions that they'd like to ask, feel free to send me an email at jesse@seviseducation.com, and I'll be glad to engage in further discussion with them. So thanks again. Have a good day.
Thank you, Jesse. This has been episode 11 of EdUp International. Thank you for joining us. If you are a thought leader in international education, if you'd like to appear on EdUp International, please go to the website you see here, podpage.com/edup-international. Go to the contact us page and send me a note, and let's get you on the show. We'll see you in a week with episode 12 of EdUp International. Thanks for joining us today.